Up next, here on Early Breakfast, we take a look through the papers.
This is Times Radio.
Let's go through the stories in a bit more detail. Barrister, broadcaster, president of Octopus TV, Andrew Eborn is here. Andrew, good morning.
Good morning, Rosie. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Look, from your legal perspective,
Yes.
the full fat Rwanda plan isn't going to cut it, so says the legal advice that's been issued to the Prime Minister. What do they mean?
Well, they're sort of saying it's going to backfire. And it is interesting because they're saying that you might designate Rwanda as a safe country. And Abraham Lincoln used to while away many hours in dining tables saying, how many legs does a dog have if you call his tail a leg? The answer is still 4, because saying that a tail is a leg doesn't make it a leg. So calling Rwanda safe doesn't sort of get round the general proposition. But the proposal is to basically disregard the Human Rights European Convention and basically enable to implement the Rwanda policy. And you might recall, and everybody recalls, one of Rishi's 5-point plans on the 4th of January this year. And actually, if you look at the statistics, on the 13th of November, there were 27,284 people had been detected crossing the English Channel in 2023, according to the Home Office. And actually, that's down a third from the same date in 2022. And the part of the real reason for Rwanda is not, we didn't want to send anybody there, really. We wanted to stop people coming over, because say, look, you're not going to be processed here. We're going to send you to a foreign country. And the real problem is this, is that not one single person has been sent there. It's hitting the headlines as a complete disaster. But Downing Street and the Home Office confirmed that there are delays, obviously, to the new Rwanda treaty, but they insist they remain confident of signing a deal early next month. And it's going to be very interesting what happens on this. It's sort of always coming back to bite Rishi as we're coming up to the anniversary of his 5-point plan. He did say, and it was said in Jeremy Hunt in the autumn statement as well, that they've hit 3 of those. Some of them are very easy, like inflation and so on and so forth, and recovery. But things such as the NHS waiting list and obviously the whole thing about stopping the boats, that's not going to be achieved, certainly by the end of this year.
Yes, it's going to be really interesting to look at what kind of strategies the Prime Minister tries to pursue. We're going to be looking at the politics in about 15 minutes' time here on Early Breakfast. The big sort of, I don't know if it's a gossip story, front page of the Mail, and lots of the papers have got, stories reporting on the details in Omid Scooby's latest book that decries the royal family, really, as poisonous. What were sort of the main claims that stuck out to you, Andrew?
Well, it's basically plain nasty and vicious, I think, is what they say. They basically say that Charles, Camilla and William, they conspired to undermine Harry and Meghan as depressingly poisonous. And Omid Scooby-Doo, in his latest book, they take aim at the Princess of Wales, who is basically the nation's sweetheart at the moment. Every time she appears on the front pages, people coo and say how glorious she is and what a fine, fine leader. But basically, she's been branded as cold in this particular book, and she's been lambasted for backing mental health causes while ignoring Meghan's cries for help. It really is its pantomime season. Where's your career? It's behind you. The royals are depicted as pantomime-style villains. And you do think that this is basically sort of obviously trying to grab the headlines, where there's, if you want to draw a crowd, start a fight. And there's no better way of getting social media bursting a blood vessel than to talk about Harry and Meghan and the royal rift.
But when we see stories like this, Andrew, how much credibility and truth do you think there is behind them? I'm sure there are sort of, sources that have briefed clearly against the royals here. But, do you sort of take this with a very large pinch of salt, or do you think maybe this gives a helpful indication into the attitudes inside the royal family?
Well, not just a pinch of salt. I think a whole lot's wife of salt would be appropriate. I think the reality is that you never let the truth stand in the way of a good story. And any family has issues. The sad thing about this is that everything's played out in public. And I'm probably one of the very few people who speak up for Harry and the great work he does on things like the Invictus Games and so on and so forth. And also what Meghan was trying to do, and I think she's still got political ambitions in the States, so don't be surprised if that actually takes a turn. The reality is this, is, as I say, every family has issues. It's very sad to have this played out in this way, but everything, you have to turn up the volume to 11, as they would say, to make sure you get those headlines. Poisonous. And as you rightly point out, so much else is going on in the world. For the Mail to lead on this, I think is... well, it just shows the interest there is actually from the general public.
Well, exactly.
In the story.
I'm sure the book will do well, and we'll all enjoy sort of teasing through the details of this family. You know, I can't believe that, Charles has been described as inept, that William stonewalls Harry. Well, there are also details inside the Times this morning. Something that isn't going ahead today, Andrew, is this meeting that was supposed to be taking place between Rishi Sunak and Kyriakos Mitsotakis, the Greek Prime Minister. A real row over the Elgin marbles, and actually no real new information has come to light. But we know that the Greek government would like them back, and the British government and the British Museum are saying, well, no, you can't have them back. It seems quite surprising that this meeting is now not going ahead.
Well, there were other issues that we can discuss as well. There's obviously all sorts of issues on the global stage, but Greece has long insisted that sculptures which have been held by the British Museum for more than 200 years belong in Athens. And it's actually the 1963 British Museum Act which says that the institution can't give away objects except in very limited circumstances. What Diamond Street is saying is, well, hang on, you could have met with somebody else. You could meet with Oliver Dowden. He was offered up because Rishi was busy doing other things. But there were lots of other issues they were due to discuss, including European security had been on the agenda. I think it's Diamond Street are very clear they're not going to give them back. And the language gets more and more emotive. You talk about the museum's custodianship of the Parthenon friezes was like the Mona Lisa being cut in half, is what they've said.
Do you think that's right?
Well, there is a lot of history, and I get it, and I've been in Athens fairly recently, and I went to the various places, and there's obviously a lot of passion about these things, and the way that the media can whip up that passion obviously plays a part of it. But I do think it's going to rumble on. I don't think there's going to be a resolution anytime soon.
But you think the British Museum and the British government have got the right side of the argument?
I think I play devil's advocate. I spent all my time playing devil's advocate.
I'm asking you what you think.
Lawyers don't have opinions. They get paid for opinions. I think that if you look at the history of it, there's a very particular reason why it was brought over to the UK in the first place, and you can examine that. I do think, for the sake of international relations, we should have those discussions. But it's not just the Parthenon. It's not just that sort of side that we need to look at. There are lots of things apart from the Elgin marbles that you need to look at. There's lots of art all around the world, which if you start transitioning and saying, look, this has got to go back to the rightful owners, we could look at that. But I do think that George or not war, let's have a sensible discussion about it and make sure that a fair resolution happens. But I don't think that resolution is going to happen anytime soon.
There has been a resolution between David Walliams and Britain's Got Talent, front page of the Mirror. Remind us of this story. It was a pretty significant fallout, and it's ended up being quite expensive.
Well, as the Education Secretary will remind you, and indeed many people from Gordon and John Major and many other people beforehand, the whole issue about hot mics, about what you say in the studio when you've still got a mic on, will come back to bite you. And this is how the story started. There was a leak audio of basically David's unguarded comments about some of the contestants on Britain's Got Talent, a very popular TV show for those who haven't seen it. And the reality, he was effing and blinding and calling them all sorts of things, which obviously he didn't want out in public. That went out in public, and David was sidelined and basically gotten rid of by the big show. He's sued them, and what happened, it's now been declared, again, the headline on the Mirror, that's what they've chosen to go with. He settled his bitter legal fight with them over his leaked X-rated jibes. And apparently it's supposed to be around £1 million, most of that no doubt in legal fees, and the apology from the bosses, which I guess is what he wants. But the real question is this, it's so important for those in the public eye to be able to get back in the public eye, because he is a brilliant comedian, he's a brilliant children's writer, and doing very, very successfully on that sort of basis. What the real question is, to what extent is it now going to affect his career? I think people have sort of warned it's Schiaparelli return to the show. I can't imagine him sitting in the same studio.
I don't think he'll be back, no. Because, yes, his privacy
Exactly.
may have been breached in revealing those comments, but ultimately it's going to be very challenging for him to then sort of sit there and make polite comments about other people who come on the programme.
It's absolutely right, Rose. I mean, the other point as well to remember, I always say that history repeats itself because we don't learn the lessons from history. If you've got a microphone on, if you're sitting in a TV or radio studio, be very careful what you say because it's going to come back to bite you.
Yes, I mean, truthfully, the advert break's quite short on early breakfast. I don't think I've got very much time to get myself into trouble. And actually, there's no one to talk to, really. So,
I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you in the breaks.
Maybe Sting and Asma have got something more to worry about. Look, interesting story, front page of The Sun. Gone to VAR. Is this going to be the right decision? I don't know how much of a sort of football fan you are, Andrew, but VAR could be extended now to checking corners, free kicks, yellow cards. It seems to me, and look, I'm not a sporting pundit, but obviously we have sports news every morning on the programme, that we haven't quite got VAR right yet before we start expanding its remit.
Gone to VR, gone to VAR, as they say. No, I'm absolutely a football fan. It's been a large part of my business, is big sponsorship deals, selling rights around the world with Octopus TV. That's what I do. And I'm also, as you know, a big techie. And I think using technology to determine how sports should work is tricky because people, when they go to see a sporting match, want the match to flow. They want to be able to see the results in real time. And the secret of this is to get the technology right. They're saying it could be extended to checking corners, free kicks and yellow cards. They call it balmy. I'm not sure it is balmy. I think it is helpful if the technology is right. But you can do it a lot quicker. And this is what we should be looking at, is making sure that the technology works. And it can work in real time rather than the ref going to jog off and watch a screen for several, what feels like an eternity while the match gets on. But I think that's the way to do it. Short answer is if it interrupts the game, that's no good. If you can make it for better and make sure proper decisions are reached, that has to be good.
Okay, so if it works, excellent, but if it doesn't, no. Well, we'll get the
Yes.
analysis from TalkSport in about 5 minutes' time. Andrew, thank you so much. Andrew Eborn, barrister, broadcaster, futurist, president of Octopus TV, going through the papers with me this morning.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.